has risen. You're listening to the Oracle Broadcasting Network.
We were born before the wind, also younger than the sun. Yeah, the bonnie boat was one as we sail into the mystic.
All right, folks, we're back with the American Awakening. Michael Herzog, your host, coming to you live from Phoenix, Arizona, with my special guest, Don Nicoloff. And Don, I don't want to get you off track here because I know there's so many lies about this guy that you just don't know where the beginning and where the end is. But I did want to ask you, Obama, we know his birth certificate and all the controversy surrounding that, but you had penned in here on page 17 about his selective service registration, even raises more doubts. You want to take a moment and expound on that for us a little?
Well, I don't know if it raises dots. It raises red flags for sure.
I said doubts, not dots.
Oh, I thought you said dots. Sorry.
Oh, all right.
Well, we'll blame it on Skype. How's that?
Well, yeah, maybe it's my microphone. I was going to say, go ahead.
Okay. Normally, when one turns 18, one is required to register with the Selective Service. Obama did it 5 days before his 19th birthday. That's the first thing. He did it on the 30th of July, 1980, or so the story goes. Now, the stamp on the card from the post office where one makes such a registration is dated July 29th, or the day before. It raises great doubt as to the authenticity of both his signature and the stamp. But let's say the stamp is correct and Barack made a mistake. What made them use a stamp on July 29th, 1980, that was not used by the post office beginning in 1970? In other words, in 1970 they ceased using that stamp, yet they chose to use it for Barack Obama's Selective Service registration.
Him and him only, because he was
Yes.
I mean, this is absolutely fascinating. I mean, they've got a stamp on there that they quit using in 1970, yet they stamped it July 29th, 1980. So they hadn't used this stamp in 10 years, and they pulled this stamp out of the archives and stamped his Selective Service registration and then put it back in the archives again, right?
Mm-hmm. Now, there's another series of numbers, and I don't have the document right before me. I didn't feel it was even worth taking up the space in this article, other than to in a general sense, refer to it. There's what is called the Document Location Number, or the DLN, and the document begins 08, signifying 2008. This was pointed out by a man who had done work with ICE in Texas for 32 years. He was a government employee, had a top secret clearance, sometimes even higher, had an impeccable record, and he had a year prior to this document being released, he had requested a Freedom of Information Act request to see the original document. And they hemmed and hawed for almost a complete year. Finally, he got the document shortly before the election, and it was altered. They had added numbers. They put 80 in front of the original 08 to make it look like it was done in 1980. And he knows that that's fraudulent, that the whole document, because of the manner in which it was tracked, was falsified, as well as the manner in which it was stamped and of course, signed. It's all that information is conflicting. So it's another forgery. Forgery is a felony. And now you have a government agency forging documents, aiding and abetting. So there's a conspiracy here. This is racketeering.
So it would be safe to assume there was a Freedom of Information done on Obama's Selective Service Registration. It would be safe to assume, based upon the results of that and the fraud that has been committed, that is a blatant fraud, that literally this guy, not only was it fraud, he never had one to begin with. They made one up, just like they obviously have made up a certificate of birth for this guy.
Didn't I say that from the beginning of the show?
But again, it goes back to square one. You know, who is this guy? Who are these people? Where did he come from? And even a more pertinent question, Don, is that, you know, the conspiracy here, the planning that went into this, you know, was this anticipated? Was this planned, you know, shortly after? During the pregnancy, or long before he was even born, for crying out loud?
This was likely planned before he was even born. And much like John McCain. In fact, I've been asked by listeners and people that visit my website, folks that call into shows that I'm on, just like this one, and they ask me, well, why didn't John McCain raise a stink about this issue? Well, McCain is in the same dilemma that Obama is, because the hospital he was supposedly born in Panama Canal Zone at the Coco Solo Naval Base wasn't built until about 7 years after his birth. And I reference that in this article. I reference it in McCain's article, which is parts 1 and part 2 of the Three Stooges Go to Washington, that McCain's background directly links him to the King of England, who at the time was the Prince of Wales. That was Prince Albert Edward, sired many illegitimate children, and Sidney McCain Sr. and Jr., the grandfather and father of John McCain, were really John McCann and Albert McCann. And so this fictitious John McCain that we had as a senator and running as a Republican contestant against Obama was in the same dilemma. This has gone on more than once. We have the same thing with George H.W. Bush. And my research is not refuted, Michael. It's been determined to be very accurate. No one's refuting this research either.
Well, okay, it's like, and I remember, and of course, you know, don't take this wrong, folks, but you know, in a civil or a criminal, I think a criminal trial, that the defense attorney is very careful about what he brings up because they don't want to open a door, and that's what you're speaking of here. Is that John McCain, if he would have brought this up during the campaign, would have been opening the door. He couldn't do that because those who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. But that being said, Don, would it not be true, assuming that, you know, this has been premeditated from, like you say, maybe before Barack Obama was born, that, I mean, John McCain knew that he was going to lose. I would think. Now, is it likely? Is it probable? Is it most, you know, a certainty that John McCain knew he was going to lose? Or do you really think he had thoughts that he could win? Or do you think that they don't tell him that he's going to lose, but they know he's going to lose and he doesn't? I mean, how does that go?
Well, you'd have to ask him what he was actually thinking. I truly think that George Bush probably thought John McCain was going to win, and so did the rest of the Republican Party. And this ditz that they picked as a running mate was definitely shooting yourself in the foot, so to speak, as far as ruining your campaign. He certainly lost popularity, but if you recall, the day before the election, it was neck and neck. How did this landslide vote result out of a neck and neck race?
Well, that's a subject for another show, like vote fraud. Anyway, listen, you hear the music. We got to take a break. We'll be back in 3. When we get back, folks, I'll open up the phone lines. Anybody wants to call in with a question or a comment, or you want to add something to it, we'll be back in 3. Mike Herzog, the American Awakening, with my guest on Nicoloff. Stick around, more to come.
Howdy. My name is Chris Milligan, publisher of Trying Day Books.